prey, and their tentacles, which can grow to be about 3 meters in length, are filled with thousands of stinging cells, and those are all attached to a venom gland, and that's used to paralyze fish and shrimp. But it's also the animal that has been known to kill people faster than any other venomous creature, because there's enough venom in the sting of a box jellyfish to kill a fully grown man in as little as 4 minutes. And of course it can paralyse a fish in seconds and kill an adult human in about 4 minutes. And it's always been a common myth that jellyfish stinging all happens due to touch. But it's actually got nothing to do with touch. It's all down to the chemicals in our skin. Because, of course, quite often when a box jellyfish tentacle comes into contact with the skin of a fish or a human, it reacts to the stinging cells are fired off by the chemicals in our skin. Of course, on a human, they attack the skin cells, the nervous system, the heart, and the respiratory system. It can cause excruciating pain, and if it doesn't kill you, it can leave you with damage like burns, welts, or even bad deformed skin problems, which can last for a very, very long time. Of course, in many parts of northern Australia, where there's lots of tourists around, from October to April, if you're in a tourist-filled area, the only place you can swim in the sea is here in a great big net. And that's all down to protect the people from box jellyfish. Because if you're stung by one, it will either kill you in minutes or cause you the most unbearable pain for days. Because a few years ago, there was actually a scientist, I can't remember his name, but he and a colleague were diving in Australia's seas, and of course his colleague, Teresa, they took her gloves off and a bit of tentacle gnawed her on the wrist, and the most exposed part for him was just at the top of his lip, and so he got pretty badly stung there. And they were laid up in hospital for days with not even the maximum dose of morphine being able to stop the pain. Well, he was in the hospital for 2 days. His colleague Teresa was there for 2 weeks. Of course, there's actually a species of box jellyfish called the Irukandji jellyfish, which was only discovered in the 1960s, and that creature, that one's venom, which is in its tentacles, that can be up to 1 meter in length, and Irukandji are probably no bigger than my thumbnail, but even so, they have probably the strongest venom of any other jellyfish. In fact, in extreme cases, the Irukandji jellyfish venom can increase blood pressure so badly it could cause a heart attack. And so it's always important when you're working with box jellyfish that if you're in the water with them, you wear a stinger suit. It's sort of like a wetsuit, but it's not made of wetsuit rubber, and it's not like the skin of a human or a fish. So if a tentacle touches a stinger suit, it won't fire off a stinging cell. But also, probably the only safe place to touch a box jellyfish is here, the bell. Because jellyfish name is actually very, very misplaced, because these animals aren't fish at all. They have no backbone, no spinal column. They're basically just one big blob of jelly. And it's actually believed that these could be some of the most ancient of all creatures that were around that were actually among the first life forms to evolve on planet Earth billions of years ago. And Here is their range in northern Australia. Now, the next animals I'm going to show you are probably my favourite lizards. They are the monitor lizards. To be precise, the lace monitor and the parenti. Now, the lace monitor lizard lives in the forests and jungles of Australia, but the parenti, which is the largest lizard in Australia, lives in the desert of Australia. And of course, you find monitor lizards all over the world, and they are the reptile equivalent of a Terminator. They have hardcore body armour, enormous claws for close combat, a sixth sense, tasting the air with their forked tongue. They can swim, they can climb, they can hold their breath underwater for an hour. They can sniff out crocodile eggs buried in the sand, and unlike most reptiles that can only run in short bursts, they can actively chase after prey, like rabbits or rodents. In fact, they can tackle anything, and they will also use their formidable tail as a defensive weapon to just rip at a big animal that might be threatening to them. And of course, monitor lizards are opportunistic creatures. I mean, they'll pretty much take anything they can find. I mean, they'll mostly scavenge for prey that has been killed on the roads, but they'll also take, as I mentioned, they'll take crocodile eggs, but also bird eggs, as well as some small mammals, lizards, frogs, birds. It's pretty much anything they can run down. Of course, the parenti here, it's of course because where it lives in the Australian desert, it tends to be very, very hot, and there's barely any rain there, so how the parenti quenches its thirst is by eating lizards like bearded dragons, blue-tongued skinks. And it's actually recently been discovered that monitor lizards have venom. In fact, it was only thought until about 20 odd years ago that there were only a couple of lizards, the Gila monster and the bearded dragons, that were truly venomous, and that these animals purely used bacteria. But Dr. Brian McGregor-Fry, who's one of the world's leading experts on venom, he actually discovered that monitor lizards and their bigger cousins, the Komodo dragons, do have true venom in their saliva, not just bacteria. Of course, they have wicked teeth that are all backwards curving and as sharp as a surgical scalpel. And of course, if they're hunting big prey, like a medium-sized mammal, they will quite often use venom to kill it, or crush its skull with a single bite. But if like parenti, it's hunting lizards, then it will quite often it will just bite them and thrash them around until it kills them, and then it will consume them in one mouthful. Of course, to the best of my knowledge, these animals don't have a anti-venom just yet. But while that is still in the works, even so, if I was to get bitten by a monitor lizard, it probably wouldn't kill me straight away, but it would probably do me damage that could last for a very, very long time. But even so, these are one of the most beautiful animals in the world. And this is their range. And now, the next animal I'm going to show you is probably the most dangerous bird in the world. It is the cassowary. Now, cassowaries are in the same family as ostriches, emus, Darwin's rhea, and same group of birds, and they probably stand no more than 1.5 meters tall. And in Australia, they live in the steamy rainforest and occasionally open grassland. And believe it or not, they are actually probably the only bird on the planet that will deliberately attack people. And they are probably the closest thing we have in the natural world to a dinosaur. I mean, they have a large dome on their head, as well as an enormous claw like a velociraptor, and also a temper to rival the Hulk. And of course, they say that the females are always the most bad-tempered, and that might be down to them protecting young. But actually, the females take no part in looking after the young. That's the big bird there with the 3 chicks. That's actually not the mother, that's the father. Because what happens is, like, the female lays the eggs, then the male broods them, and the female just swans off and leaves dad to raise the kids. And of course, well, as this vet shows us here, cassowaries are formidable creatures. In fact, they can jump 1.5 meters, about 1 or 2 meters high, and they can use their enormous, and they kick out with their legs to use those claws to slash at the head and stomach of any would-be attacker to defend their chicks. They can see off crocodiles, dingoes, Tasmanian devils, and they would quite easily rip open your stomach with a single kick. And of course, coming from a bird enthusiast like me, this is probably the most frightening bird in the world. And of course, I've always been very scared of the cassowary, and they are a bird I would not want to come up against in the rainforest. Here is their range in Australia, but they're also found here in Papua New Guinea and even into Indonesia in Southeast Asia. Now, the next species I'm going to show you is probably the second most toxic animal on the planet. It is the Blue-Ringed Octopus. Now, the Blue-Ringed Octopus is absolutely tiny. It's probably no bigger than the palm of my hand, but even so, this is in the cephalopod group, like as well as octopus. There's also squid, the cuttlefish, and it may only be tiny, but even so, it has probably the most powerful neurotoxin on the planet. And of course, at the centre of all those 8 tentacles, it has a tiny little parrot beak that it uses to paralyse its prey, like crabs, worms and small fish, but it has got the unfortunate side effect of being extremely painful and fatally toxic to humans. But there are cases of people accidentally picking up blue-ringed octopus only to die hours later without even realising they've been bitten. Of course, because of how small this animal is, there is no anti-venom to it, to the best of my knowledge. And of course, the rings around its body are what give it its name, and they can be turned bright, vibrant, or neon blue, and they can be used to intimidate something bigger than the octopus. And of course, one of the best places to see blue-ringed octopus is in Sydney Harbour. It's around Sydney Harbour, in fact, because there is a very big concentration of blue-ringed octopus around Sydney Harbour. But even so, if you want to see them up close, you need to have special permission from biologists to go with them to catch a blue-ringed octopus. But even so, it's not something I would advise, because because this animal is potentially one of the most venomous on the planet. And here is